It all started like any other autumn morning on my farm. Cool breeze, golden sunrise spilling over rows of corn, and the scent of pumpkin spice drifting from the food truck parked by the main barn. My place, Hollow Hill Farm, is a small family-run operation, famous around these parts for three things: award-winning apple cider, a monster-sized pumpkin patch, and my annual corn maze. Every fall, we get a flood of families, school groups, and tourists coming out for a taste of that harvest charm. I'd been running the maze for 9 years. Each year, I designed it myself, carefully crafting winding trails, clever dead ends, and just enough spooky scarecrow stations to make kids scream and parents laugh. It was a tradition people looked forward to. But as much as the community adored it, there was one person who most certainly did not. Karen. She wasn't a customer. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't even a neighbor, really. Just someone who lived down the road in a big 2-story house with solar panels, plastic flamingos, and an unearned sense of authority. She didn't like the traffic on weekends, didn't like the laughter, didn't like the idea of dirty city people wandering around like it's a county fair, as she once so elegantly put it. Karen treated my farm like it was an eyesore. She called the county once to complain about excessive scarecrows. Another time, she left a typed note on my gate accusing me of running an unauthorized outdoor amusement park. But this year, she took things to a new level. I caught her cutting through the cornfield one crisp October morning, head high, purse slung over one shoulder, just marching straight through the maze path like she owned the place. She didn't stop to ask, didn't pay, didn't care. Just said, "Shortcut," like it explained everything. I'd barely opened for the day. When I called after her, she barely turned. "It's a public nuisance anyway," she shouted over her shoulder. "I have every right to walk through." Then she disappeared into the maze. And that was when I got the idea. She wanted to treat my farm like her personal shortcut. Fine. Let's see how she liked the scenic route. I stood at the maze's edge, staring into the rustling stalks long after Karen vanished from view. My jaw clenched. This wasn't the first time she'd cut through without permission, but it was the smugness that got me. Like she thought she was untouchable. Like my land, my work, my time didn't mean a thing. She didn't even try asterisk to pretend she was lost or confused, just barreled through like a one-woman HOA patrol with a chip on her shoulder. I walked back toward the barn, fuming. I could hear kids laughing in the distance, their boots crunching leaves, someone calling for more cider. It should have been a great day. Instead, I was replaying the sight of Karen disappearing down the path like she was queen of the corn. That's when I remembered the new maze design I'd sketched out earlier in the summer but hadn't used. It was a chaotic, confusing layout I'd jokingly labeled the cornfunder. It didn't loop. It didn't even make sense to the eye. It twisted, backtracked, spiraled into itself, and led to one spot in the dead center of the maze. An old outhouse I kept for emergencies. It was locked, unused, and as of last week, freshly painted bright blue because I was bored one afternoon. I hadn't used the layout because it was too tricky for families, but for Karen, oh, it was perfect. That evening after closing up shop, I pulled out the stakes and rope lines and began the quiet, deliberate work of reshaping the maze. I worked by lantern light, adjusting signs, closing paths, and marking the new route. The final piece was a brand new trail marker, a cute wooden arrow labeled "Shortcut to Parking." I placed it just where I knew Karen liked to enter. The next morning I opened as usual. Kids played with hay bales, couples posed with pumpkins, and the smell of fresh kettle corn hung in the air. I kept an eye on the side field. Sure enough, around 10:15, I spotted her. Karen. Same oversized sunglasses. Same I own the sidewalk attitude. She stepped right through the staff-only rope and followed the fake shortcut sign with a satisfied huff. She had no idea she was about to take the longest shortcut of her life. Karen marched into the maze like she had somewhere important to be. No hesitation, no glance at the ticket booth, and certainly no acknowledgement of the giant "Do not enter, staff use only" sign she ducked under. I watched her disappear into the rustling green tunnel of corn, the stalks swallowing her like the jaws of a hungry beast. I sipped my cider slowly, savoring the moment. Show time. It didn't take long. The beauty of the redesigned maze was that it was subtle in its cruelty. It didn't feel wrong right away. In fact, the first few turns felt intuitive, just enough to lull someone into thinking they were on the right path. Karen, with all her confidence, wouldn't have suspected a thing. But 5 minutes in, the trail began to split into choices that looped back in hidden spirals. What looked like progress was actually just a large oval. Paths crossed themselves like tangled shoelaces, and several signs were just vague enough to inspire confusion. Almost there, and you're doing great, all pointing toward the same inevitable destination. And at the very heart of it all sat the blue outhouse. Now, to be clear, this wasn't some dirty, cobwebbed shack. It was clean, locked, and even had a friendly little sign on the door. Out of order. Please use main facilities. I'd even added a decorative gourd on the stoop because I'm not a asterisk monster asterisk. But for someone expecting a quick way through the farm, it was a punchline in architectural form. I waited about 20 minutes before the first text came in, from one of my employees stationed at the cider tent. Karen's in the maze, been circling the outhouse for 10 minutes, looks like she's trying not to look lost. I chuckled and casually made my way over to the maze entrance. I could hear rustling deep within the corn, some faint muttering, and what might have been a very frustrated sigh. A couple guests nearby giggled as they passed by the clearly marked real entrance, oblivious to the drama unfolding beyond the stalks. Then came the real treat. Karen emerged at the edge of the field, not the proper exit, mind you, but literally through the corn wall, leaves in her hair, purse strap askew, and dust all over her shoes. She looked like a soap opera character who had just escaped a jungle. I gave her a cheerful wave. Enjoy the shortcut. She stopped dead, breathing hard. That was not asterisk funny. I ended up in the middle of nowhere next to some disgusting porta-potty. It's an outhouse, actually, I replied, keeping my grin perfectly polite. And I thought you liked shortcuts. She opened her mouth, probably to spew something ridiculous, but caught sight of a family watching nearby and clenched her jaw instead. Without another word, she stormed off, probably back to her flamingo-adorned fortress of HOA rage. The maze had done its job. And I wasn't done yet. After Karen's grand exit, complete with leaves tangled in her hair and the unmistakable stomp of offended dignity, I knew she wouldn't let it go. Karen didn't just walk away from things. She plotted, schemed, and filled out complaint forms in triplicate. So I wasn't surprised when 2 days later, a bright white envelope stamped with the official HOA logo showed up in my mailbox. The letter was exactly what I expected, overly formal, self-important, and dripping with passive-aggressive phrasing. It accused my corn maze of being a navigational hazard, called the outhouse, intentionally misleading, and even claimed I had created an emotional health risk for those with poor directional awareness. That last part made me laugh out loud. Karen had just described herself in a legal sentence. Still, I wasn't worried. The maze was on private property. It was clearly marked. She had ignored the signs and trespassed. I made copies of everything, photos of the signage, screenshots from my security cameras, yes, even the one of her stomping through the corn like a deranged scarecrow, and I drafted a little file labeled Maze Gate, Exhibit A. But as much as I loved being prepared for the HOA's weak attempt at revenge, what I really wanted was something a little more poetic. Something she'd feel something public. So I hatched my next move. It started with a simple idea, a new maze event. I called it the Maze of Missteps and advertised it as a weekend-only special designed for adults who think they know better. I didn't name names, of course, but the wording was unmistakable to anyone in the loop. Take the shortcut challenge. If you think you've got the instinct, follow our shortcut trail. But beware, it may lead to surprises. Within hours of posting it online, the event went viral in the local community. People loved the idea. Memes started showing up on Facebook. Someone posted a stock image of an angry woman next to corn with the caption, "Don't be a Karen, use the map." I didn't even have to fuel the fire. It spread like hay in the wind. Even better, local businesses wanted in. The bakery offered to sponsor pumpkin cookies for participants. A nearby brewery asked if they could host a Missteps and Microbrews evening to follow the maze run. As I stood by the barn the night before the event, watching the final setup, a friend from town who helped me lay out the new twist whispered, "You think she'll come back?" I smirked. She won't be able to resist. because the only thing Karen hated more than being outsmarted was being out of the spotlight. By Saturday morning, the farm was buzzing. The maze of missteps had become the must-do event of the weekend. Cars lined the dirt road, laughter echoed across the fields, and people were practically sprinting toward the maze entrance, phones out and ready to document their shortcut adventure. I hadn't seen this much excitement since the year we hid golden tickets in the pumpkin patch for free cider refills. The special trail, labeled "Shortcut If You Dare," was roped off at the side of the maze just like before. This time, though, I'd enhanced the experience. Hidden speakers in the corn played faint whispers of "Are you sure?" and "Almost there," in a comically spooky tone. The outhouse had been redecorated, too. I painted it neon orange and added a fake skeleton on the porch holding a sign that read, "You took the wrong turn, genius." Around noon, I spotted her. Karen. She stood near the edge of the pumpkin patch, arms crossed, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, clearly surveying the scene like a general preparing to retake lost ground. She was alone, no kids, no husband, no reason to be there except her own pride. I could see it in the way she squinted at the shortcut sign. She was trying to decide if it was about her. It was, and whether she cared. She did. Without a word, she strutted past the main entrance and ducked under the rope, again ignoring the "for official shortcut participants only" sign. I gave a nod to my assistant near the cider stand, who discreetly activated the speaker loop inside the maze. The whispers began. The traps were set. 15 minutes later, a teenager who'd taken the proper route came out wheezing with laughter. "Dude, someone's yelling in there. I think they got lost in the Karen path." I strolled casually toward the shortcut exit and leaned against the fencing. Through the gaps in the corn, I could hear her, muttering, grumbling, and at one point, clearly shouting, "This is ridiculous." She tried to backtrack, but I'd closed off the route behind her with twisty paths and another misleading arrow. Definitely not a dead end. Finally, she emerged. Again, not through the proper exit, but by charging asterisk through the corn wall like a malfunctioning GPS in human form. Her sweater was covered in leaves, and one of her earrings was missing. She looked like she'd been wrestling raccoons. People were watching, phones were out. Someone whispered, "Is that her? Is that the shortcut lady?" Karen looked around, saw the grins, the sideways glances, and for a split second I swear she considered making a scene. But instead she let out a sharp, "Your farm is a hazard," spun on her heel, and stomped off toward the parking lot without even looking back. I waved, "Thanks for visiting, come again next time, bring a compass." The crowd roared. Karen's dramatic exit had been the highlight of the weekend, hands down. Videos of her storming out of the corn with her sweater snagged and hair full of husks were already making the rounds online, set to dramatic music and hashtags like "Cornfrontation" and "Lost and Karen." The local Facebook group lit up with commentary ranging from amused sympathy to outright applause. But what made it all even sweeter was how the community rallied around it. People loved the maze more than ever. Families came back just to try the Karen shortcut. One dad even dressed up in a Shortcut Survivor t-shirt and filmed a mock PSA in front of the outhouse, dramatically warning others of the path of pride and poor decisions. I didn't have to do any extra marketing. Karen had done it all for me. And now I had plans to make the maze a permanent attraction. I got to work designing a new section, one I called the Perpetual Shortcut. It was its own self-contained loop, open only during weekends with a few quirky traps, a mirrored turn and echo spot, and of course, the locked outhouse still sitting dead center, now with a guest book that people could sign with things like "Oops," and "I've learned my lesson." I added plaques along the route with quotes like, "Not all who wander are lost, except Karen. When in doubt, follow the signs, not your ego. And pride goeth before the outhouse." Visitors loved asterisk it. Then came the cherry on top. The HOA board, probably tired of the weekly complaints and second-hand embarrassment, sent out an official newsletter thanking Hollow Hill Farm for being a vibrant and engaging community attraction and encouraged residents to support local events that foster creativity and family fun. Translation: Sorry, Karen, but we're not shutting down the maze. I framed that newsletter and hung it near the ticket booth. Karen, she went underground for a while. No more stomping across the field, no more angry notes on my gate. She'd become something of a cautionary tale among newcomers. Every season, when guests ask about the shortcut path, I just smile and say, "That's a special part of the maze, created in honor of someone who really hated taking the long way." I don't say her name anymore. I don't have to. The outhouse says it all. Word of Karen's shortcut fiasco spread far beyond our little town. Local bloggers wrote about it. Someone even submitted a short video clip of her exit scene to a regional morning show's Funniest Fall Fails segment, and it aired. Blurred face and all, sure, but everyone in Maplewood Hollow knew exactly who it was. You could practically hear her screech through the static. It became a running joke at the farmer's market, the coffee shop, even the library's fall book club. She was now unofficially the maze lady. Karen didn't show her face much after that. When she did, it was always fast and tight-lipped. Sunglasses bigger than ever. A sun hat that looked like it could pick up satellite signals. She avoided the cornfields like they were cursed. And in a way, maybe they were for her. But just when I thought she might fade into autumnal obscurity, Karen made one last gasp for control. She tried to start her own neighborhood fall walk, posted flyers on community boards about a refined, noise-free seasonal stroll through her property. A respectful, shortcut-free celebration of the season, whatever that meant. She even advertised organic cider tasting, which, according to my friend who went purely for the gossip, was just warm apple juice in plastic cups next to a folding table. Only 3 people showed up. The event ended with Karen shouting at someone's golden retriever for walking too close to her leaf pile. Meanwhile, back at the farm, my Maze of Missteps event was wrapping up with record turnout. Families came in droves. Kids wore corn-fused t-shirts. I even had a little souvenir photo booth next to the outhouse with a cardboard cutout of Karen's infamous shortcut pose, minus the actual Karen, of course. People posed beside it all day, laughing their way through a tradition born from her tantrum. The best part, she couldn't say a word. The more she complained, the more she fed the story. And with the HOA officially backing the farm, she had nothing left to stand on. It wasn't just revenge, it was vindication, in full public pumpkin-scented display. And every time someone thanked me for the maze or tagged me in a video titled, "Don't take the shortcut," I smiled. Because Karen had wanted to embarrass me, control me, cut through my land like it was nothing. Instead, she became a permanent part of it. As the last crisp days of fall began to settle in, and the corn maze slowly turned from golden green to winter gray, life on the farm eased back into its slower rhythm. The laughter, the cider, the camera flashes, it all quieted, replaced with the rustle of drying leaves and the low hum of tractors prepping for winter. I walked the maze one last time before we officially closed it down for the season, stopping for a moment beside the outhouse that had become its unlikely centerpiece. It still had the little pumpkin someone had placed on the step, and the guest book inside was full of messages, some funny, some heartfelt, all echoing the same theme: humility, hilarity, and a healthy respect for corn-based navigation. My favorite entry simply read, "Note to self, never assume you know the way just because you're loud." Karen never returned to the maze. She stayed in her house, her flamingos leaning slightly from autumn wind, her lawn perfectly raked but utterly lifeless. I heard she'd unsubscribed from the town newsletter after the photo of my corn maze finale made the front page. No one saw her at the fall festival. The neighborhood kids even started using her front walk as the starting point for their Halloween scavenger hunt, whispering like her house was haunted. And honestly, it kind of was. Haunted not by ghosts, but by pride. Meanwhile, Hollow Hill Farm thrived. The Maze of Missteps became a new tradition, already being requested for next year. I expanded the field, added new elements, and even started working on a spring version involving sunflower paths and fake signs with clever twists. People were already calling in with reservations for next season. Every once in a while, someone would bring up Karen. "Whatever happened to her?" they ask, chuckling, and I'd just smile and reply, "She took a shortcut to a lesson and found a locked door instead." Because here's the thing about shortcuts, they're only worth taking when they're earned. When you've done the work, read the signs, followed the map. Karen thought she could stomp her way through anything, but in the end, she walked herself right into a dead end. And I just made sure the door stayed closed. As I locked the maze gate for the season and looked out over the now quiet fields, I couldn't help but think, sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's a locked outhouse at the heart of a perfect trap, and a sign that says, "Better luck next time."